If people could please stand if they'd like to for the reading of the council prayer and the acknowledgement. And I'll call on Councillor Sinfield to read the council prayer.
Thank you. Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen.
And I now call on Councillor Galt to read the acknowledgement of country.
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today.
Thank you. Please be seated. Welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Before we commence the meeting, if I could request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. Thank you. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website, so you'll be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the council website as soon as possible after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered during the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, or if needed, the meeting will be postponed. My name is Councillor Jane Addis. I'm the Mayor of Boroondara City Council. I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. So seated to my left on the horseshoe table in the council chamber are Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Councillor Wes Gold and Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth. And then moving round the table, Councillor Di Gillies, Councillor Susan Bigger and Councillor Victor Franco. The officers in attendance tonight, Philip Storer, the Chief Executive Officer, Carolyn McLean, Director Community Support, Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer, Daniel Freer, Director Places and Spaces, Carolyn Terry, Executive Manager, People, Culture and Development, Mance Bassey, Acting Director, Customer and Transformation, Scott Walker, Director, Urban Living, David Thompson, Manager, Governance and Legal, and Elizabeth Manu, Senior Governance Officer. And there are also a number of other officers in attendance this evening, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. So the first item is apologies. Mr. Thompson, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have an apology from Councillor Thompson and Councillor Watson for the meeting this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 1, adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on 29 November 2021. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Sinfield?
So moved.
And seconded Councillor Stavrou. Is anyone opposed to that? There being no one opposed, I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you. Direct declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? Mr. Storer.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I have a conflict in relation to item 7.13 and we'll leave the chamber for that matter.
Thank you, and we'll note that down. Thank you. Item 3, deputations and presentations, petitions, public submissions. Mr. Thompson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are none of the aforementioned for this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 4 is informal meetings of councillors. Councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the record of informal meetings of councillors as printed in our business papers? Councillor Bigger, and I'm not sure whose light was next. Councillor Gold, maybe, is the seconder. Was it the
Yes.
item on the... Yes,
Yes, it is. Thank you.
For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? No lights on, so I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you. The next item is public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr Thompson, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have 4 questions with notice that were received prior to 12 noon today, and a copy of those questions have been circulated to all councillors.
Thank you very much. So yes, there are 4 questions, and as mentioned, people will receive a written reply as well. So the first one is from Mr Ian Huntley of Balwyn North, and I believe Mr Huntley has arranged to be online, so is not in the chamber. So the first question is Commonwealth funding for railway car parks. Now this question's been disallowed in accordance with rules 55.1.3 and 55.1.3 of the governance rules. And Mr Huntley will receive a written response to this disallowed question in due course. The second question from Mr Huntley relates to Commonwealth funding for railway park and ride facilities in Glenferrie. The question: whilst the draft placemaking plan for Glenferrie shows that the offer of federal funding on railway park and ride facilities made during the 2019 election campaign is still being assessed by Council, the recent report by the Senate Finance and Public Administration References Committee, which examines severe shortcomings in the relevant federal funding program, shows the project is now at the planning stage. Which of these is the accurate view? And Mr Huntley, thank you for the question, which is being allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, and that's because the question has previously been put in writing to a councillor or a member of council staff more than 10 days before the council meeting at which the question is submitted. And I'm going to call on the Director, Places and Spaces, Mr Daniel Freer, to respond to this question from Mr Huntley. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Council has undertaken technical feasibility studies for the commuter car parking projects, focusing on determining the car parking yield, cost and project impacts for each site and the overall conditions of the sites in terms of deliverability. At tonight's council meeting, before council is a report seeking endorsement to commence broader community engagement on these projects. Following this period of consultation, analysis of the findings and further consideration will be given, and a decision by council on to whether further progress these projects will be taken at that time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Freer, and Mr Huntley will receive a written response to the question as well. Now, the next question is from Mr Lee Norton of Balwyn North. Thank you, you are there. And the question relates to council procurement policy. And the question is, why, given the public interest in council procurement processes and probity and its place in the Climate Action Plan, has the draft procurement policy not been subject to public exhibition? And again, the question has been allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, as the question relates to a matter or matters regarding item 7.1 on the council agenda this evening. And I'll call on the Chief Financial Officer, Amy Montalti, to respond to this question from Mr Norton. Thanks, Ms Montalti.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, I thank Mr Norton for his question. Given that the procurement policy is predominantly developed to guide operational procurement processes, there is no legislative requirement under the Local Government Act 2020 for the policy to be subject to a public exhibition prior to adoption. Consultation on the policy did occur with Council's Risk and Audit Committee, and feedback received has been incorporated into the policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Montalti. And Mr Norton, you will receive a written response to your question. Now, there's another question from Mr Norton, and it relates to commuter car parking feasibility. And the question is, will Council publicly release the full report of the survey of community conducted by Wallace Social Research Group and provide an explanation of the validity of the results if, as stated in the report, 17,747 people were randomly contacted for the survey, and out of these, 562 people participated and completed the survey. And again, the question is being allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules as the question relates to a matter or matters regarding item 7.11 on the council agenda this evening. And again, I'll call on the Director, Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to Mr Norton's question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Pending Council's resolution on the matter this evening, community engagement is proposed to be undertaken over an 8-week period commencing the 14th of December and closing on the 10th of February 2022. As part of the engagement process, the reports regarding the community survey undertaken by Wallace Research Group for each precinct will be made available to the community on Council's website or Engage website. I must say that there's potentially a delay in the accessibility version of the Wallace report at this point in time, so a PDF version will be made available immediately. The percentage of all people contacted who agree to complete the survey is in keeping with market research standards and does not impact on the validity of the results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Freer, and Mr Norton, you will receive a written response as well. Now that takes us to the end of questions. So item 6, notices of motion. Mr Thompson, are there any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no notices of motion for consideration this evening.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to presentation of officer reports. Could I just check, does any councillor have any issues or concerns with respect to the order of the agenda, or wish to flag any item for discussion or items which may not need to be discussed, and on that basis councillors would be interested in moving them en bloc? Based on officer advice, there is a possibility to move the following items en bloc. I'll go through them fairly slowly because there's a couple of them just to make sure that you know which ones. So the ones that could possibly be moved en bloc are 7.2, October 2021 monthly financial report, 7.4, Amendment C353 Part 1, Q Individual Heritage Places and Regrading, adoption. 7.5, Amendment C355 Barandara Kurrajong, 337 Auburn Road, Hawthorn, adoption. 7.7, September 2021 Quarterly Performance Report. 7.8, Contract 2021/72 Tree Root Services. 7.9, Contract 2021/101 Drainage Pit Clearances and Associated Services. 7.11, Commuter Car Parking, Feasibility Update and Request to Progress to Community Engagement. And 7.12, Draft Borondara Bicycle Strategy Community Consultation. So they're the ones that we're considering. If anyone would like to move a motion to consider moving those on block, Councillor Franco?
No, I don't support 7.11 and 7.12 being moved as an en bloc motion. I have general reservations with en bloc motions, but in respect of those two, nor do I support 7.1, but I don't think that was one of the ones you read out.
No. So 7.2 you don't support being moved on block, but the others, and 0.11.
7.11
Yep.
and 7.12 I do not support being moved as an en bloc motion.
Okay. So commuter car parking and draft Borondara bicycle strategy. Okay. So would anyone be interested in moving a motion to move the others on block? So we'd take out 7.11 and we'd take out 7.12. Councillor Stafford, you're happy to move that motion excluding 1.1 and...
I am.
Yeah. And seconded Councillor Galt? Thank you. So can I just check if anyone's opposed to that motion? No? Look, I might allow the mover to speak to it, given that it's, if you would like to, given that it's of some consequence, or are you happy just for it to be put?
I'm happy to be put.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favour of moving the motion as listed, thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. So we'll go to item 7.1, the first item, which is Procurement Policy 2021-25, and that's going to be moved by, introduced by Jacinta Stevens, Head of Strategic Procurement and Contracts. No? Yes? Amy Montalto will introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The Procurement Policy 2021-25, included in the report before you, replaces the current procurement policy and has been developed in response to the new Local Government Act 2020. The Act requires Council to adopt a procurement policy by December 2021, and we're bringing this updated policy to Council for adoption this evening. Whilst the procurement policy has been substantially rewritten to meet the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020, it's important to note that the vast majority of key principles have remained consistent, including the policy applies to all contracts for the purchase of goods, services and works, and sets out threshold levels for the type and nature of procurement process to be followed. There is an emphasis on competition and value for money. The policy outlines the public tender and expression of interest process, and all of the main procurement principles in the previous policy still apply. The policy provides a contemporary approach to procuring goods, services and works into the future, with greater emphasis on our community and Council's corporate social responsibility in environmental, social, ethical and local economy outcomes, and is supported by procurement guidelines which you will find attached to the report. Consultation was undertaken with high procurement user departments across the organisation, along with Council's Risk and Audit Committee. Feedback received has been incorporated into the policy. Implementation date for the updated procurement policy is 1 January 2022, as detailed in the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions for Ms Montalto? Councillor Gott, your light's on. I'm assuming you. Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering which part of the policy it is that specifically speaks to sourcing things locally and supporting the local, being Burundara and Australian economies.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. They're contained within the guidelines, so in the social responsibility sustainability guidelines, which are attached as an attachment to the report as well. That's where all the detailed information for officers is contained.
You have a follow-up?
No. I didn't think it was as explicit as perhaps it could have been, but I'll leave my questions there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Franco.
I don't have a question at this stage. I'd just like to note that I do have a motion I'd like to move, which is an amendment to the officer's recommendation at the appropriate time.
Thank you. So I can't see any lights on for further questions, so I think that might be the time, Councillor Franco.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, but adding a point 4, and point 4 to read that the policy and supporting guidelines be issued for public consultation in the month of February and returning to Council thereafter thereafter. Now, the reason, can I talk to the motion at this point?
Let's just check that that's Councillor Sinfield.
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, can I just check that that's going to work? Because it says adopt the procurement policy, that will be okay? Can I just check with governance?
Need to understand what the intent of Councillor Franco.
Point of order, Chair. The motion's been moved and seconded, so regardless of what governance might think, the motion's on the floor and the mover has a right to speak to it.
Okay, well, Councillor Franco.
Thank you. This motion is before us today, and it doesn't include public consultation. I think the policy and the supporting guidelines should be made available in the interests of transparency and open government for public comment and review. There are issues, such as the issue that Councillor Sinfield has raised in terms of local sourcing and procurement, that's of interest to many members of our community, and equally many members of our community with environmental concerns and interests have raised the importance of this policy and having an input to it. I raised this issue myself at our audit committee and the need for this policy to be brought before Council. I'm pleased it is here, and I think I'm conscious that the policy needs to be adopted by the end of the year, and Council has such an obligation. I think we can adopt it and at the same time issue it for public consultation. After it comes back out for public consultation and comes back, if there are any issues that have been raised or no issues, then it can be ratified again. So I commend the motion and the additional, including the point 4 that I've raised, to all my colleagues.
I should have checked, is anyone opposed to this? I think we'd better get it up on the screen. Councillor Franco, is that what you had in mind? Is it? Oh, sorry, it's on my screen. It's up on yours now.
you could simplify it, be issued for public consultation in February 2022, and at the conclusion of this period, the matter be brought back before council. That's fine.
Thank you. Are you comfortable with that now?
Yes, thank you.
And Councillor Sinfield, you were the seconder. Are you happy to second that motion?
I am, thank you.
And can I check if anyone's opposed to that motion? Well, I think I will be, but possibly someone else. So, Councillor Sinfield, as the seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, thank you. I thank Councillor Franco for putting this motion, and I welcome the inclusion of the fourth point there. I think it's very important for our community to be able to express their views on this. They have very strong views from what I understand to date. When the matter comes back before us early next year, it may not require any changes or deletions or inclusions or other considerations, but it may. We have a very intelligent community and I welcome their feedback on it. But this motion also seeks to ensure that we comply with the requirements of the Act by adopting it in its current form, and we can amend that at any stage. So I welcome that and commend it to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Well, as I'll be opposing it, I will say just that for me this is fairly procedural, and I'm confident that it does adequately cover what we understand our community wants. So I'll now return to the mover, Councillor Franco.
I've got my light on.
Oh, sorry. It's very hard to see, sorry, behind this screen.
Fine. I didn't know it was opposed, so since it's opposed, I will speak to it. Although in quite short compass, I'd be interested in some public feedback because I note, for example, at page 17 of the policy, one of the options for procurements between $250,000 and $500,000 is to obtain 6 quotes. And I think sometimes within a bureaucracy, be it state, local or federal, sometimes it's not appreciated just how much work and cost that puts businesses to. And if you knew that you're one of 6 quoting for a job in that sort of range, you may well not be interested in doing it. So I think it'd be interesting to hear also from some of the businesses that respond and participate in procurement activities, because the reality is that is a hell of a lot of quotes for that sort of range, particularly when you're looking at roadworks and the likes that make that sort of amount quite commonplace. So I'd be certainly interested in the benefit of some feedback, at least in respect of those things, and there's no doubt other things that haven't been contemplated. So I think on balance it's worth the exercise.
Thanks very much, Councillor Park. Councillor Franco as the mover.
No, I have no further comments to make. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll now put the motion up on the screen. Those in favour? And those against? So that motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you. So the next item, I think, is 7.3. Discontinuance of roads and reserves policy, and I believe Amy Montalti will be presenting that, our Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I'm pleased to present the updated discontinuance of roads and reserves policy. The policy documents how roads no longer reasonably required for access, no longer required for the purpose for which they were originally set aside, or roads being closed for any other purpose, will be discontinued and sold or transferred. The policy is important to ensure transparency, equity and consistency when going through this process. Council's discontinuance of roads and reserves policy has no mandated review or expiry period. However, the policy was last reviewed by Council in 2015. Officers have completed a review of the 2015 policy to ensure it has provided Council with a consistent and unambiguous framework for the progression and settling of road discontinuance projects, including compliance with the new Local Government Act 2020. Key amendments to the policy are outlined in Part 4 of this report. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Montalti. Councillors, are there any questions? No, I can't see any. So is somebody happy to move a motion? This is like at an auction waiting for the first vote. First bit. Councillor Hollingsworth, you're happy to move?
Happy to move officer's recommendation, thank you.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Gillies? Thank you. Is anyone opposed to that motion to assist Councillor Hollingsworth? Okay, so there's nobody opposed. So Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, certainly this policy is timely and, as it was mentioned, 6 years since the last review, so very much support the content and the purpose and the intent, and obviously if there's redundant roads, access roads, reserves to enable commercial value sale of those properties to go to a residential property or property owner that can utilise that and help reduce the burden of the maintenance of an area that's not utilised, then I think this is a good option. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gillies is the seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add that I think this policy adds clarity for the officers, but definitely also for the community. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, did you have anything to say to wrap up? I can't see any other lights on.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, I think item 7.6 is the next item, which is adoption of amendment C342 Kew Hebrew Congregation Heritage Overlay. And I think that's going to be introduced by Nick Brennan, Senior Strategic Planner. Thanks, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. This report relates to Amendment C342 to the Burundara Planning Scheme, which proposes to place a heritage overlay over the buildings at 53 Walpole Street in Kew, which is also known as 11 Malmesbury Street in Kew. On the 24th of May 2020, Council received a request from a community member to investigate the heritage significance of the buildings. This request was made in response to a planning permit application to expand facilities for a school occupying part of the site, which proposed demolition of many of these buildings. The UPDC resolved on the 7th of September 2020 to seek authorisation to prepare and exhibit a planning scheme amendment to introduce a heritage overlay across the entire site. Authorisation for Amendment C342 was granted on the 13th of November 2020. Public exhibition of the amendment was carried out between the 18th of February and the 19th of March 2021. On the 17th of May 2021, the UPDC resolved to refer the amendment to an independent planning panel for consideration, and this panel was held from the 22nd to the 30th of July in 2021. 3 submitters appeared before the panel. The panel's report was received on the 13th of September. The panel has ultimately supported Council's position that the heritage overlay be extended over the entire site, subject to some changes to the exhibited heritage citation. At the UPDC meeting on the 8th of November, the UPDC resolved to adopt an updated version of the citation incorporating the changes recommended by the planning panel. The UPDC also recommended that officers engage with the trustees of Norburns Morgan House to ensure any factual errors within the citation were corrected. Accordingly, officers invited the trustees to provide details of those factual errors. In response, the trustees submitted an updated version of the citation. Officers have reviewed the proposed changes and revised the citation where errors could be clearly identified. Further changes were not supported, as it is not considered appropriate to make other changes to the citation beyond which is what has already been exhibited and considered by the panel. Concurrently, on the 22nd of September 2020, Council issued a notice of decision to refuse to grant a planning permit to redevelop part of the site for an expansion of the existing school, which provides an education centre for children with autism. The applicant appealed Council's decision to VCAT. The Minister for Planning subsequently called in the application and referred the matter to the Priority Projects Standing Advisory Committee for advice. Following the Advisory Committee hearing, the Minister for Planning advised Council on the 2nd of September 2021 that he had decided to issue a planning permit for development of the site. The Minister also refused Council's request for an interim heritage overlay on the grounds that this would prevent the permitted development. While the Minister has granted a planning permit implying demolition of buildings on the site and has refused Council's application for an interim heritage overlay, for the time being the buildings remain in place. Issuing a planning permit is no guarantee that the proposed works will take place. The property has been identified as having heritage significance worthy of protection by a heritage overlay. Until there is material change to the site, that significance remains. It's therefore recommended that the Council resolve to adopt the revised heritage citation and to adopt Amendment C342 and to submit the amendment to the Minister for Planning for approval. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Brennan. Are there any questions for Mr Brennan? Councillor Stavro?
No questions, Madam Mayor, but I would like to move a motion when it's appropriate.
Can't see any other lights on, so now might be the time. Thanks, Councillor Stavro.
Thank you. I would like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Sinfield, you seconding that?
I am.
Thank you very much. To assist Councillor Stavro and Sinfield, is anyone opposed to that? No? Thank you. So would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor Stavro?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. And let me start by thanking the officers for the great effort they've put into producing the report. And sometimes it may look a thankless task when the process doesn't appear predictable. But let me state that your work and unbiased advice is highly valued. We've heard from Mr Brennan the sequence of events, and I think I don't propose to repeat them. Suffice it to say that there's a principle at stake here, and I think that principle is that of predictable process. We do live in a great country that understands that sometimes the outcome may be unpredictable, but all of us believe that the process should not feel arbitrary. I think that this issue, one can only assume that it has taken state-level significance for the Minister of Planning to take such an active interest in a local issue and calling in the VCAT application. Look, there may be considerations, but not evident to the Boroondara community, but all parties, I think, would have been very well served if the Minister had waited to receive the full heritage report. That would have been the process, and in a Victoria of due process, not an autocratic decision-making body. I think that's very important to say. I think, rightly, the Minister in the past has strongly admonished us to do more to protect heritage in Boroondara, and I can only hope that the Minister will take his own advice and help us protect Boroondara's heritage in this instance. I plead with my fellow councillors to support the officer's recommendation.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stavro. Councillor Sinfield is the seconder. And I can't see any other lights on. Councillor Stavro, did you want to say anything to wrap up?
No, I'll leave it at that, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So look, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. So item 7.10 is our next item, which is Contract 2021/226, Retail Energy Procurement Australia Contract 2506 to 0641, electricity, small sites, and that's going to be introduced by Mr. Frere. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. This report seeks to award contract 21/226 retail energy, electricity, small sites. This contract replaces an existing supply contract for electricity supply to council's smaller building sites. The initial sites of the contract are shown in attachment 1, noting that sites can be added or removed during the 3-year term of the contract. The procurement process for this contract was conducted by Procurement Australia, enabling aggregation of sites and an improved purchasing power. The process has also enabled Council to select an accredited green power option, so now that all of Council's electricity will be from renewable sources, given our major sites started using renewable sources 2 years ago. This includes aquatic centres and seasonal pavilions. This will further reduce Council's emission and bring us very close to our 2030 target to reduce actual emissions by 90%. To provide some further detail on this point, the contract is estimated to reduce emissions by a further 2,000 tonnes of carbon per annum. This brings our total emissions down to approximately 4,000 tonnes per annum, which represents an 85% reduction from the 2007 levels. Endorsement of this contract award will enable Council to sustainably purchase electricity for the next 3 years. The officer recommendation is on the screen and I commend that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Frere. Councillor Hollingsworth?
No questions, but happy to move a motion at the appropriate time.
I can't see any other lights on, so now might be the time. Thanks, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Look, I'm particularly delighted to have this item brought forward tonight, and I think it's wonderful that Burundara...
Just moving the motion on the screen.
Sorry.
And
thank you.
Let me just check if there's a seconder. Is somebody happy to second this motion? Councillor Franco? Yes, thank you. And I'll just check, is anyone opposed to the motion? No? So I'll now hand back to you, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Yes, delighted that this is before us this evening. I think it's wonderful that we can now be in a position to have our small sites as well as our large sites operating under clean energy, green energy. And just wanted to again compliment the officers on a very diligent competitive tender process and a comprehensive tender process, and to obviously have this here before us this evening. I'm very grateful, so thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Franco is the seconder.
No further comment.
Okay, thank you. I presume you don't want to say any more to wrap up, Councillor Hollingsworth?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I can't see any lights on, so I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you, I'll declare it carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Frere. So our next item is 7.11, commuter car parking. Feasibility update and request to progress to community engagement. And that's going to be presented by Christine White, Manager, Capital Projects. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The federal government provided feasibility funding of $2.25 million to investigate council-owned car park sites at Hawthorn, Canterbury and Camberwell. The commuter car parking projects provide council with an opportunity to develop precinct-based car parking facilities to support long and short-term car parking for the community. These projects enable the increase in car parking allocations as well as facilitating placemaking outcomes sought in the Mailing Road Place Plan and the draft Glenferrie Road Place Plan. The commuter car parking projects encourages the use of public transport, supports the economic vitality of the shopping precincts and relieves parking pressure on local streets by increasing available off-street parking. Importantly, there is an opportunity to reimagine how safe, amenable and accessible car parking can be developed with improved functionality, including provision of lifts, opportunities for solar panels, electrical charging stations, bike storage and repair stations, and increased greening. This report presents the feasibility works comprised of two main components: the technical feasibility and the market research undertaken through a community engagement survey process, with findings intended to be communicated as part of the broader consultation and engagement phase. In summary, the Office's recommendation is to endorse the draft commuter car park projects as outlined in this report at Glenferrie, Canterbury and Camberwell for the purpose of community consultation commencing from the 14th of December 2021 to the 10th of February 2022. And secondly, following the consultation phase and giving consideration to the community feedback, receive a further report at a future council meeting in 2022, giving consideration to progressing each site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms White. Are there any questions? Councillor Sinfield?
Thank you. I appreciate the period of consultation is perhaps longer than it would ordinarily be given the time of year, but I thought we had a position on avoiding going out over school holiday periods.
Perhaps I might answer this, Madam Mayor, given we also have similar issues with regard to advertising of planning applications which come in. The approach we take is to still advertise over that period but extend the period so that we capture those people who may well have gone away and have returned from holidays. So this is consistent with that approach.
Thank you. Councillor Gold?
No further questions at this point in time, but I'd like to foreshadow a motion when the time's correct.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other lights on, so Councillor Gold, your motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that the officer's recommendation is accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Gillies, you've got your light on to second?
To second, please. Thank you.
Thank you. For the benefit of Councillor Gold and Councillor Gillies, is anyone opposed to this? Councillor Franco, you're opposed? Thank you. So I'll now hand back to the mover, Councillor Gold. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Very happy to, Mayor. Thank you. I'd like to first thank the officers for a very detailed and thorough study. I've probably, as part of the Glenferrie project, been with this for quite a while, most of the year, and I've seen the amount of work that's gone into this, and from discussions with my fellow councillors, the work that's gone in Canterbury and Camberwell as well. I think it's a huge amount of work, and you've taken the time to consult not only with lots of the community, but to look at many of the technical issues, and certainly I was somewhat opposed at the outset, but I was really wedded to the logic of the whole thing now, and I can see the steps taken to make it a much more palatable proposal. Our proposals the proposals for these car parks are now well anticipated by our community. It's been talked about quite widely, and I now believe it's essential we go back and seek formal comment from a much wider community audience. So I recommend allowing this to go out for that consultation, and I seek your support for that tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Councillor Gillies, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve for a moment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak or comment? Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I consider this to be one of the most controversial series of projects that this council is embarking down, and we're proposing to consult with the community over the school holidays, commencing now in late December, over the Christmas New period, all the way through January. Admittedly, we've gone to the 10th of February when school starts back, but I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, we could only make it worse by passing this motion on Christmas Eve and having it back on Australia Day. So it's only a tad bit more for what is one of the most significant controversial projects that we're all aware of. I'm going to read out the question that was disallowed and answer it myself from Mr. Hundley. And Mr. Hundley wrote to this council on the Commonwealth threat to withhold funding from councils. In view of the recent reports that the Federal Infrastructure Minister,
Councillor
Paul
Franco,
Fletcher, you're going to disallow my comments and speech?
I think we just need to pause and just get some advice because it was disallowed for a good reason.
I'm proposing to answer it in my own way with my own views, not on behalf of council, but me as an elected councillor passing my view on this issue.
Well, would you like to not read out the question but speak to your view?
Okay, I'll read out my view. And I'll state my view. I'll restate that. I mean, various councils have, and I'll name those councils, they've been in the media, Glen Ira and Bayside, have been threatened with a denial of Commonwealth funding on unrelated projects if these councils were to not accept funding for the railway car parks. Has this council received any such threat? Are we aware of it? What's going on in relation to this? There are probity issues surrounding the use of these funds, the way it's been approached. This council has also been approached by a Senate inquiry, and we have made 2 submissions to that Senate inquiry. The elected councillors haven't been involved in those submissions to the Senate inquiry. I learned about those submissions from members of the public, not from our management team or from colleagues. I think there are some substantive issues here. Now, if we look at the substantive transport issues, is encouraging single occupancy car trips to inner city train stations the transport solution that we champion? Is this a good use of public funds, whether they're from ratepayers or from taxpayers? I mean, it goes to the heart. Is this a good use of funds, and is this the way we want to go down? What is driving this project? And to me, it reads as if we're racing headlong to deliver the Josh Frydenberg promises that he went to the election campaign with. And I question that it's good public policy. I question that it's good transport policy. I don't think we've done the detailed analysis looking at the alternatives and what could really be done and should be done to better support. And I think there's also significant urban design and public domain issues in relation to the delivery of above-ground car parks. These car parks are for effectively single occupancy trips to be parked there all day. They're not necessarily there to support the retail sector with short stay parking.
We have 3 minutes as well.
Thank you. I'll leave it there. I'll be voting against.
Yes, Mr Storer would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not to enter the debate, but just to ensure councillors have the facts in front of them in coming to the view you're being asked to reach. The first of which is that the proposition for consultation is consistent with Council's approach, as I said earlier, more generally, and we have in fact extended the time even beyond where we would normally extend it for our community to provide us with feedback. The other point I would make is that in relation to the response to the Senate inquiry, we were simply asked for facts as to when it is that Council received certain requests from the federal government in relation to the program. So we've provided those facts. There is no opinion on what has been expressed to them. Had there been, we would have been in front of Council asking for your direction. So I just want to be clear that that is what we've actually done. The other point I would make is that Council has not received any correspondence from the federal government in relation to its potential unwillingness to proceed with the program, as has perhaps been the case for Glen Ira and Bayside councils. Burundara has not received any such correspondence.
Thank you, Mr Storer. Councillor Sinfield, you wish to speak to the motion?
I do, thank you. I welcome this matter coming before us, and I welcome the motion. I think going out to community consultation is a very important part of this project, and I welcome the community's feedback on it. I'm delighted to see that the period of consultation is substantially larger than it would ordinarily be, taking into consideration the school holiday period and festive season. It's taken a very long time to get to this point, and I acknowledge the officers, it's no fault of yours, but it's a very complex matter that we're dealing with, and there's a whole heap of other ancillary things going alongside it. Albeit that this project is not one that we initiated, it's one that was asked of us, I suppose, by the federal government. I welcome commuter car parks and 3 of them in this report in our municipality, reducing the congestion in the CBD and reducing the kilometres people take to get to work and providing an alternative to them. Although I hope that should these car parks go ahead and be provided for our community, that they will not in any way take away on-street car parking provided for a very different purpose, not commuters, provided for shoppers to support our local economy. These are 2 very separate projects, and I don't want to see those waters get muddied. Can I ask, not to be necessarily incorporated in the motion, but can I ask of officers that a copy of this report and the resolution, once passed, be provided to the federal member? Thank you.
That's been noted. Thank you. Councillor Park.
Just to speak briefly to it, I support the motion. I think that car parking remains one of the very significant problems for the residents of Boroondara, and on that basis I welcome the proposed infrastructure, because whatever alternatives people might like to proffer, the reality is that this is going to be an issue for many, many years to come, and so little money has been spent in recent decades on the provision of car parking infrastructure that I think this is a magnificent opportunity that needs to be embraced.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I would agree with Councillor Park that car parking continues to be a challenge for people in Boroondara, though I'm not completely convinced about what the right solution is to that. And I do share some of Councillor Franco's concerns about this this piece of work. And I have had concerns expressed previously about the timing of this community consultation, though I am relieved that it has been extended somewhat into February, which I do think is an important step. I'm going to support this motion because it's a decision to consult only. Ultimately, Council will be briefed on the consultation, the feasibility studies, and to determine if any or all of these car parks will go ahead. And I think that that's the right process. But it is important, and I hope that our community, as Councillor Franco has noted, because this is significant and potentially controversial, and very important, really, regardless of where the funds come from, it is still very important. These are major projects, and so I would hope that our community does come forward, step off the beach, and take the time to put in a submission to this important issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Biggar. Councillor Gillies, you reserved your right. Did you want to speak?
Just in support, thank you, Chair, but to agree with those who have said parking is of great interest and need to our community. So where parking is proposed definitely warrants public consultation, and this is the next right step to take, is to go to public consultation and then re-examine it. So I support and thank those who wish to support the next steps being undertaken. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, I can't see any other lights on, so I'll go back to Councillor Gold as the mover to close the debate.
Thank you, Mayor. My only hesitation in supporting the officer's recommendations is in item 1 and referring it to as commuter car parking only. It most certainly is commuter car parking, but in 2 of the examples, Glenferrie and certainly Camberwell, it's the car parks proposed serve a much bigger purpose than that. And much of the work that's been done over last year and previous years has been looking at how we revitalise the 2 shopping centres adjacent to it. And it's a key concern with the interest in strip shopping centres dropping away due to online ordering and then the problems with the pandemic. And I think it's essential. I'm very excited about the possibility of getting Glenferrie Road upgraded, even Camberwell Junction upgraded. And these are key first steps to doing that. And it not only provides, the car parks proposed not only provide for the parking displaced by making way for more pedestrian and cycle areas, they do provide some longer term parking, that is clear, but not just for commuters. There's other needs for that. I certainly know shop owners in Glenferrie Road, and I'm sure it's exactly the same happens in Camberwell, leave their stores every couple of hours and shuffle their cars around. We have long needed some longer term parking, and it happens to be wrapped in with some commuter car parking. My initial concerns did relate to the commuter car parking, but I understand and have been advised and briefed that there have been quite detailed studies on the likely source of the people using it. And by and large, there are not people driving in from Box Hill, stopping halfway and taking the train. There are majority people coming from our own municipality and using the train, etc., etc. So it basically serves our community, and there is a lot of, you're right, it is controversial, these car parks, and I think the only way we can move forward and get it finally resolved is to get formal, widespread feedback to the proposals. I think this step is absolutely essential, and I recommend you support it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galt. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Those against?
I call a division, thanks.
Thank you. So, okay. Yes, so look, I'll declare the motion carried, and then we'll put the motion again. So all those in favour? Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Gold, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Bigger and Councillor Addis, and those against, Councillor Franco. Thank you. So I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you. Now the next item is 7.12, Draft Borondara Bicycle Strategy Community Consultation. And that's going to be presented by Jim Hondrakis, Manager, Traffic and Transport. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The Burundara Bicycle Strategy sets out the framework to improve bicycle infrastructure and increase mode share in the City of Burundara. The current bicycle strategy was adopted in 2008 and is due for renewal. The development of the new draft strategy commenced with community and stakeholder consultation to identify issues and opportunities for consideration. The strategy involves two distinct documents, a draft strategy and a draft implementation plan. The draft implementation plan includes a range of projects and other initiatives to support safer and connected bicycle routes. It lists actions with an estimate of costs to be undertaken in the first 2-year period. The plan is intended to be reviewed and renewed every 2 years over the life of the strategy. For the first 2 years, the estimated cost to deliver a range of projects is in the order of $4.9 million. This cost would be considered as part of Council's annual budget process to provide an annual allocation. Officers would also pursue external funding opportunities through both state and federal government avenues. For years 3 to 10, an indicative rate for anti-dooring bike lanes, similar to what we have on Glenferrie Road, is in the order of $500,000 per kilometre. For physical separation measures, an indicative rate is $550,000 per kilometre. For the Department of Transport main roads that are listed, such as High Street, Doncaster Road, Bulleen Road, Camberwell Road, Glenferrie Road, Burke Road, Stanhope Grove, Yarra Boulevard and Taronga Road, the estimated cost is in the order of $10.8 million for almost 20 kilometres. Traffic management costs would be in the order of $870,000. These rates would guide Council's funding advocacy for treatments on main roads. For Council roads, such as Greythorn Road, Highfield Road, Union Road and Mont Albert Road, the estimated cost is in the order of $5.6 million for 10.2 kilometres. Again, traffic management costs are estimated in the order of about $330,000. Some key features of the draft strategy include separate path facilities for pedestrians and cyclists on high-use shared paths, use of separation curbing for on-road bicycle lanes, lower speed limits for strategic on-road bicycle links, and new path links in reserves and parks. Importantly, these initiatives would involve investigation, consultation, and would be presented to Council for consideration and approval. Officers are seeking approval to commence community consultation on the draft strategy and draft implementation plan. Following community consultation, the draft strategy and draft implementation plan are intended to be refined and presented to Council for formal consideration and adoption early in 2022. Further details are included in the report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr Hondrakis. So, Councillor Franco, you had a question.
Just a question about the consultation period. Would that go through to the end of February? Can that go through to the end of February?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes it can. We would commence tomorrow and can go to the end of February.
Thank you. Can we... Okay.
So, maybe we'll get to that in a minute when somebody moves a motion. Any other questions? Councillor Biggar?
But I would like to move a motion when the time is right.
Can't see any other lights on. So were you seeking to add?
I am. I would like to move the officer's recommendation with the amendment that we consult till the end of February 2022.
Thank you.
So we don't have a date.
Just get the words up on the screen.
Should we put a starting and closing date on it?
Apparently we can. Did you want to? Let's just check what the officers had in mind. Mr Hondrakis, did you have a timeline?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we can commence tomorrow and conclude at the end of February.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar, does that look like what you had in mind as your motion?
Yes, I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Franco, you happy to second? Yes, I am. Thank you. For the benefit of Councillor Biggar and Franco, is anyone opposed to the motion up on the screen?
No, but it's not on the screen. Could I ask that it goes back up so that I can finish reading it, please?
You're right, the screen's blank. Okay, so is anyone opposed to the motion up on the screen? No. Okay, so thank you. So I'll now go back to the mover. Councillor Biggar, would you like to speak to your motion?
Indeed, I would. I won't speak for long because we have no opposition, but COVID has changed many things for us. And I think a view of cycling and our shared path network would have to be seen as one of those. We've had increases of up to 300% increases in use of some of those path networks. And as people know who've spent much time on things like the Gardeners Creek Trail, it can be like a free motorway in terms of congestion these days, which is great in many ways. But it is a sign that maybe it's time to rethink this. Another reason I think that this is clearly an overdue piece of work is that, as Mr. Hondarakis noted, the last plan was a 10-year plan, and it was begun in 2008. So we're overdue. It's more than enough time. This will be a 10-year strategy with an implementation plan renewed every 2 years. So this is critically important. We know that safety is the major obstacle, not just in Boroondara, but in really around the world in all studies in terms of getting people to cycle and even people to walk and feel confident walking. So I do believe that this cycling strategy will provide a healthy alternative to some of the congestion problems we've had. It's emissions friendly, it's congestion busting. It's clearly popular. The Boroondara Community Plan has shown that. So I do think that now is cycling's moment, and I look forward to hearing the community's view of that. And I would encourage my fellow councillors to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Franco, as the seconded, would you like?
Can I reserve my right to speak at the end?
Well, I can see Councillor Hollingsworth's light on, so I will, even though no one's opposed, I will.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to echo Councillor Biggar's comments and comment that obviously through 2 years of COVID and 6 lockdowns, we've certainly realised how valuable our community appreciates the opportunity to utilise bike paths and shared access points, and we've had such a strong increase in physical activity, but also in the e-mobility scooters and bikes as well. And so I agree this is very timely, very much supported. And being the council that represents the Linden ward that abuts the Solway ward, one of the most common engagements I have from community is that people are very anxious to see the shared path continued over Toorak Road, and I hope in time that that will also be realised in the years ahead and then make the trails even safer. But thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Franco.
I'll be brief. I concur with the views about COVID and the explosion in cycling. We have been inundated as a council with feedback from the community asking us to do more in terms of cycling. And I also want to make the observation as Gardiner Ward councillor where the Gardeners Creek Trail is, we do have congestion and it is concern to pedestrians, and I think one of the important things in this cycling plan is that it's recognising the congestion, it's recognising the conflict that's occurring. We just have so many people on our trails, they are so popular, we need to start looking at more innovative ways of trying to address this and trying to reduce that pedestrian cycling conflict. It's real, and I'm conscious of that. I'm on the trails myself, and I think with some of the new facilities that are foreshadowed, that have long been discussed, such as the Hawthorn to Box Hill Trail, that's a separate option that hopefully won't have those interfaces, and some of the on-road cycling treatments that will hopefully reduce some of the congestion on the paths, the separation issue, opportunities that are flagged there. I very much look forward to some of the feedback in terms of that. So hopefully it's a win-win for a broader segment of the community and not just cyclists. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Franco. Councillor Biggar, as the mover, is there anything you'd like to add before we put the motion?
One thing, because I would be terribly remiss if I did not thank the officers who have done an extraordinary amount of work on this already, just to get to this point. It's been a vast effort, and I really thank them for their professionalism and their patience and hard work on this.
Thanks, Councillor Biggar. I think we'd all echo that. So look, I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So I'll declare the motion carried. Now, the next item is 7.13, which Mr Storr is going to leave the chamber for. And this item is proposed CEO employment and remuneration policy, and it's going to be introduced by Carolyn Terry, Executive Manager, People, Culture and Development. Thanks, Ms Terry.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. In accordance with Section 45 of the Local Government Act 2020, all Victorian councils are required to develop and adopt a CEO employment and remuneration policy by the 31st of December this year. The proposed policy meets the requirements of the Act and is also consistent with the provisions in the contract of the current CEO. Officers recommend that Council resolves to adopt the policy as proposed.
Thank you, Ms Terry. Councillor Park, you have a question for Ms Terry?
Thank you. I have just one question, that is the composition. I understood that we were expecting this would be constituted by all councillors, and that doesn't appear to be what's presented here. So I'd just be interested in some commentary around that, and I'd also like to foreshadow a motion.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. The recommendation is that an advisory council be appointed with a subset of councillors to manage the logistics of the process. However, that council would only be advisory and would act in a recommending capacity to the whole of council for any decision making.
Does that answer your question, or you've got another one, Councillor Park?
No, I have no further questions. I'll address my concern by way of a motion.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, have you got a question?
I do. I have a follow-up to Councillor Park's question, and I'm wondering where in the policy I must have missed it. It explicitly says that it's to be an advisory committee.
Let me find the piece. Section 5.2.
Thank you. I'll leave my questions and comments there in anticipation of perhaps knowing what Councillor Park might do next.
Any other questions? Councillor Franco.
Look, I'd just like to foreshadow the same as Councillor Sinfield. I'd like to hear Councillor Park's motion, but I may have some questions. I appreciate that may be out of the...
That may not be possible if once we've got a motion. So have you got any questions you'd like?
No, the question I had was the one that Councillor Park asked.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can't see any other lights on, so we'll go back to Councillor Park. You have a different motion that you...
I do. It will perhaps be a little bit time-consuming because I didn't have the opportunity to deal with this in advance of the meeting. But essentially, I'm moving that Council resolve to adopt a CEO and employment remuneration policy as annexed to the minutes, but amended tonight, and the effect of the amendments would be to make this a committee of the whole of council, rather, so the provisions that relate to constitution of the committee would change, that it be read that it's all councillors, and that it be a delegated committee. So I'll perhaps stop there for the sake of a seconder being sought. And it might be that there's a need to move a suspension of standing orders, or alternatively an adjournment. But firstly, perhaps if we could see if anybody's willing to second.
Let's just, I think we need to see it up on something on the screen, don't we?
The words of the motion actually won't be significantly different in form. They'll be very different in substance, because the substance is in the policy that we adopt, and that unfortunately is going to need a bit of a rewrite this evening. But I don't think it would take more than about 10 minutes of concerted effort. So if there's a seconder, perhaps at that juncture, I could also move that the meeting be adjourned for a period of 10 minutes, if that has support.
Okay, well, I guess we can seek a seconder on the basis of something we're not quite sure of and that we're going to adjourn to discuss. Councillor Sinfield, you're...
I'm happy to second the motion as just discussed by Councillor Park, and I'm also happy to second the suspension.
Thank you.
Or adjournment, rather.
Perhaps.
I think that's probably more appropriate.
Adjournment, yep. Okay, so let's just... I'm just not sure we can actually move a motion that's not up on the screen. Just let me check.
Well, we can, but essentially it will be the same motion. So that's the motion. If you want to see what the motion looks like, the document that's to be annexed to the minutes is the one that needs to be amended.
Mm-hmm. I think they're going to be there in a moment.
That may be the effect of the motion. There might be some consequential amendments, and hence the desire to seek a brief adjournment.
Would you be happy to move the adjournment before we move this motion? I think that might be safer.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so Councillor Park's moving that we have a brief adjournment. Councillor Sinfield was happy to second. Is anyone opposed to that? So I'll put the motion that we have a brief adjournment. Thank you. That was carried unanimously. So we're now adjourned, councillors. Councillors, can I have a motion to resume the meeting? And seconded, Councillor Sinfield.
Yes.
Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So the meeting is now resumed. Councillor Park, you had a motion?
Yes, I move the motion as displayed on the screen.
And Councillor Sinfield, I think you were seconding? Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and seconder, is anyone opposed? No, there's no one opposed, so I'll go back to Councillor Park.
Look, I'll be very brief because we've got a further meeting after this one. The effect of this change in motion is simply that it means that this committee will be constituted by the whole of council, and to the extent possible, the powers of council in respect of this area will be delegated to that committee for the purposes of efficiency That's probably all I need to say.
Thanks, Councillor Park. Councillor Sinfield is the seconder.
It's not opposed. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yep. Councillor Stavrou, we don't normally speak when it's not opposed, but did you want to say something briefly?
I'm not going to oppose it, Madam Mayor. I think it's the will of the council. The only thing I would say is that I understand the rationale, but I do have some misgivings about the efficiency of it, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Thank you. Councillor Park, did you? No. So look, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thanks, Ms Terry. So general business is our next item. Councillors, are there any items of general business? We do have one, which I'll go to, and then I think we can press on while the CEO is brought back in. There is one item of general business, which is Councillor Thompson has requested a leave of absence for tonight, 13th of December. Just to let you know that prior to the meeting, Councillor Thompson did inform governance of his request to be given a leave of absence for tonight's council meeting. I'm therefore in search of a motion. Councillor Gold, your light's on. Are you? Sorry. Yeah, we've got Councillor Watson on the screen. Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move that.
Okay, and seconded Councillor Park.
I was just going to suggest that perhaps the motion could also encompass Councillor Watson.
She did actually request it, didn't she? Let me just check with governance. She didn't actually request it. Okay. Okay. Councillor... who moved it? Sorry, Councillor Park.
Councillor Hollingsworth, I think, moved it.
I think Councillor Sinfield moved it and Councillor Park was seconding.
I'm happy to second it.
I'm happy to move it. Either way, with the inclusion of Councillor Watson.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Park with the inclusion of Councillor Watson. Good. So, okay, so I don't think anyone's opposed to that motion, so I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And Councillor Galt, you had your light on for an item of general business?
Yes, I did. I'm not too sure I'm the one that should be doing this, but I've note that David Thompson this is his last council meeting tonight, and I would like to extend the gratitude of council for your many, many years of service. I've just been checking, and I think it's 15 or more. Good heavens. And I'm probably the least qualified to move this, but I remember when I entered the chambers on the first day, you said, Councillor Galt, by yourself you're absolutely powerless. As a group of 11, you're all powerful. Now, whilst I disagree at the end of the day with both of those statements, they do set the tone for council and helped us adjust to our time here, because you probably gave all new councillors the same advice, which was very well received. I also thought that in the unlikely event that I ever found myself up in the hot seat, I would be very pleased to have you next to me, correcting me and setting me in the right direction. So when you said you were going, I thought that was very unlikely to be a problem, but there is a very small chance I may occasionally find myself up there, and I am very concerned that you won't be next to us. So just from one least qualified to say it, thank you very much, and we wish you all the best in Stonington.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I do have a separate matter to raise, but following on from Councillor Galt's comments, I too would like to thank Mr Thompson for his guidance, his frank and fearless advice, and for continually upholding the standards of the council amongst the other officers. Your performance is second to none, and I thank you for your diligence and years of service.
You will be very much missed. Yes, yes. Councillor Sinfield, you had another item.
Thank you. Yes, I would just briefly like to raise as a matter of general business the continued influx of correspondence that I dare say I'm not alone in receiving in relation to the state of our parks and gardens. I would like to once again flag that with the CEO and perhaps flag it for a discussion at a CB&D to see when we might be able to get back on track and resolve this. It's been some time since our storms and higher than expected rainfall, albeit that the Bureau of Meteorology has said that we are now in La Nina and we will continue to receive higher than expected rainfall. But I'm very conscious of the feedback received from the community that we're not meeting their expectations at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. I wonder if Mr Freer could perhaps just take the councillors through what's actually happened.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. There are two essential issues that we've been dealing with. One has been around open space, mowing and maintenance, and then the second in regard to the clean-up from the storm, and I've forgotten the date, I'm sorry, and the large amount of tree removals that have been associated with that. I can't recall the exact number, but over 2,000 requests for tree removal related or branches and the like resulting from that storm. We have been working through particularly the tree matters in an order of priority around our roads, buildings and safe, I guess as a safety as a priority. Have been working more recently through all of our open space and curbside collections as well across the city. We have then had to manage that around mowing, so particularly where there are trees down in open space. We've had difficulty getting mowers through in those areas with the trees there and then not wanting to mow up and around them and coming back and removing a tree and then trying to get a mower to come back again. So it's been a bit of a juggling act. Our open space contractor citywide has had a spate of COVID-related issues with their workforce and have had difficulty in providing a full complement of staff to manage our contract, and similarly they are having the same issue across a number of other councils that they service. We have provided them last week with a formal notification under the contract of our expectations, and we expect to see things returning to normal in the coming week.
Thank you. And Mr Storer wanted to add something.
Just thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just to also ask if councillors could make sure you're sending through any of the complaints you've got, so we've got a good record of those and we can make sure to respond to every single one. So I'd be keen to see each of those. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Sinfield, you've got your light on.
Just as a point of clarification, I'm not receiving any calls or emails in relation to the storm damage and the trees down. I think that's been largely dealt with, and I appreciate the social media effort in relation to updating our community on that. It is really just around the maintenance of open spaces with mowing that is still of note. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Franco, you had an item of general business?
I'd just like to add to the same one and to the same discussion on the maintenance of our parks and gardens. I too have been receiving correspondence and queries in relation to this, and I welcome hearing from the Director and the CEO that formal notice has been given under the contract, because the standard response that we've been given about inclement weather and the difficulty of putting large machines on it, etc., and that the contractor's staff has staffing problems or difficulties, doesn't really convey the sense that we've taken our steps as the client to require our contractor to meet the expectations that we have. So perhaps at some point we could make more of a public statement in relation to our expectations and what is being done. I appreciate it's difficult, but there is a lot of angst out there and concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. And I've got one other item of general business. I think Carolyn Terry has gone, our Executive Manager, People, Culture and Development. It's her last evening with us at a council meeting. So I also wanted to thank her. I think she's probably been here, about 6 or 7 years? Something like 6 years. And thank her on behalf of us all for all the work she's done for us over those years. I was going to say something about Mr. Thompson, but he wants us to say it in private. Thank you. The next item is urgent business. Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? There being none, confidential business. We do have one item of confidential business. So, councillors, I'm in search of a colleague moving the following motion. Which is that in accordance with section 66(1) and 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to members of the public for the consideration of the agenda item titled 10.1 Waste Reforms. This agenda item is confidential information for the purposes of section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020, because the item is council business information, being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. 3(1)(a). Now, councillors, Sinfield, you're happy to move that?
So moved.
And seconded, Councillor Biggar?
Yes, thank you.
And I don't believe... is there anyone opposed? No? So I'll just put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. So that motion is carried. So I'll declare the meeting closed to the public. So to members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, the live stream will cease while confidential business is being discussed, and we will reopen the meeting to the public at the conclusion of the discussion. And if members of the public could please depart the gallery, and we'll let you know when the meeting is reopened. Thank you. Thank you. So to members of the community watching tonight's proceeding, welcome back to the live streaming of the council meeting. This is the end of council business for the evening. Before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening and wish you the compliments of the season. And I declare the council meeting closed, and goodbye for now. Thank you.